Hello all and welcome. Today we have achieved the phenomenal milestone of 30,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much for your help in getting here, guys. You all mean the world to me. So many special things to come as celebration. And to kick things off, I have my good friend, Mr. Butterfly Perfection himself, or as you may know him, Mr. Davis. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Number 1. All of this started when I got my Ouija board, and I'd never read the rules. My friends were too chicken shit, so I did it alone. I talked to 2 people that day by myself. One was a little boy named Tim, who was disowned by his parents and died in the forest. The other presence was much darker, and for 2 questions I asked, it would reply, death, which was not a valid answer. I got angry with the second one, and yelled that it proved its malicious nature to me. Nothing happened. I packed the board away, feeling as if it was maybe me the whole time, which is a common notion for the disbelievers. But then, the next 2 months happened. Between 3 and 4 AM I constantly woke up with terror, sweating, and feeling as if I was being watched. About 50 days in, I woke to the most horrid screaming and a loud thud. I thought someone was breaking in. I jumped up and felt it again, like someone was in front of me wanting me to die, and yet no sounds from my upstairs housemates. I got so scared that I quit sleeping at night. I would stay up till 6 AM at least to make sure that the ghost hour wouldn't affect me. But it came anyways. I'll always remember what happened to me at 2 months in. I was playing Call of Duty, as typical for the last 2 weeks, and all of a sudden I got this cold chill on my back. It went from the left side of my shoulder and then also onto the left side of my head, and I shit you not, I heard breathing in my ear. The pressure on the upper left side was as if someone or something was leaning its head on my shoulder. I was frightened to death, but I decided fuck it. I got up, swung my fist and screamed, "Fuck off and go away." And after that night, it seemed to stay away. I don't know why this all happened, especially when I was such a non-believer. Those months feel like a dream, but I do believe now that certain energies do manifest around us, and it's best to stay away from the evil, hurtful ones. Number 2.
This actually happened to my best friend and I 6 years ago, and to this day it sends chills up my spine. In our early teen years, Will and I were a little adventurous. Both of our mothers were teachers at our school, and part of being a teacher's kid is that after the final bell rings on your last day, it's still not summer. You can look forward to one more week of waking up early so you can help your parent clean their classrooms and pack up textbooks. It's always boring, and most of the days our mothers were in meetings, so we just ran around an empty school. I remember vividly that it was a Friday, the last day before we could experience our summertime freedom, and Will's older sister Stephanie had also come to help pack her mom's classroom. The 3 of us had been playing manhunt while our moms were in meetings. Will told us that he wanted to smoke. We were 15 and Stephanie was 17, but they'd been smoking for a few years. I'm the daughter of a lifetime smoker, so I opted out. We walked to the adjacent middle school football field, and then past an open fence and into a wooded clearing that was a usual hangout for kids skipping class. I need to interject the story to tell you that I'm from Florida, and rural Florida is nothing like the postcards of tanned beauties and flamingo skyscrapers. My hometown exists only because someone developed a way to make semi-livable land out of a swamp. So Will, Stephanie, and I sat on the outskirts of this clearing as they smoked until we decided it'd be fun to go for a walk in the woods. Will swore that there was a river that you could swim in. We walked for about 15 minutes, and that's when I realized we hadn't considered finding our way back. Most of rural Florida looks the same. Oak trees with Spanish moss, palmettos, and pine needles. None of us thought about leaving a trail. I took out my phone to call my mother, but there was no signal. I suggested that we go back, and that we hadn't told anyone where we were, and it was getting into that mid-afternoon thunderstorm time. They agreed that we should turn around, and we thought we had. It turns out Stephanie had no sense of direction, and she led us deeper into the forest. We were walking for about 30 minutes when we realized how lost we were. Nothing looked familiar, but everything did. The same flora and fauna we'd seen when we entered surrounded us, and I quickly formed a plan. Still to this day, I'm the only one who's worth a damn in an emergency. I thought if we could find another open space, we could signal for help or maybe get a signal. We walked for 30 more minutes before we saw a tree hunting stand, which was more than odd. By this point, I knew that we'd crossed over into the national park behind our school, and hunting was strictly forbidden. More walking, less talking. We were dehydrated, hungry, and bleeding from going straight through a field of palmettos. Will was the first one to see the cages, at least 20 of them. Huge metal cages with hatches propped open by sticks. Stephanie suggested it was for catching wild boars, but none of us had ever seen or heard of boars around town. Some of the cages had dried blood around them, and one looked as though it had been kicked hard from the inside. The entire time we were lost, Will had been trying to call his dad. No signal, so no luck. My flip-flops broke, so now I was barefoot and bleeding pretty badly from all the palmettos. We needed to take a break, and I sat on a log while Will went around holding his Nokia Razr up in the air, trying to get a signal. He left our sight for maybe 10 minutes when I heard him scream. Stephanie and I sprinted toward the direction of the scream, but froze when we saw two men. One was about 60, with white blonde hair that hung down to his shoulders, and a weather-beaten face. He was covered in dirt, and the denim shirt he was wearing was shredded to bits. The other was about 20, and looked as though he had just left his job at a cubicle, a button-down white shirt and nice pants. Neither were wearing shoes, and they were both crouching. These two men were squatting and looking directly at us, their arms limp and dangling, closed lips smiling. They stayed like that. It felt like an hour passed before my body's fight or flight kicked in, and I guess mine chose fight. I crouched too and stared them down. After what I'd guessed was maybe 3 minutes, the older man stood up and ran into the woods, and the younger one followed. Will re-emerged from the woods not long after, hysterical. He was crying hard and he had peed himself. He asked me repeatedly why we hadn't come when he screamed, and I tried to explain that we couldn't because of the two men. When he finally seemed to understand what I was saying, he stopped crying and went silent. We walked for another 20 minutes in dead silence when I saw pavement. We had finally run into civilization, a bike trail that runs through the national park to be exact. I had never been so excited to see asphalt. We called our parents, we sat on the ground and cried together. It had only been 4 hours, but it had felt like days. My mother bought me a huge jug of water and yelled at me for running into the woods, but she was so relieved that I was okay. I told her about the two men, and she thought that warranted telling the cops, so I wrote my statement, and that was the end. I never heard anything from the cops. About 2 weeks later, Will was over at my house playing video games when he brought up the subject of the woods. Through bites of pizza, he told me that he hadn't even seen the two men. When he was searching for a signal, he heard pine needles being crunched underfoot, and it sounded as if something was bounding at him, so he hid. He didn't even look behind him, just hid behind a fallen tree. The noise stopped, and he stood up to come back to us when he saw a woman crouching about 15 feet from him. She had dried blood in her hair and all over her shirt. That's when Will screamed, and she stared at him until she turned and ran into the woods. To this day, I don't think anyone's ever found him, and I refuse to step foot into that park.
Number 3. This happened to me 4 or 5 months ago. I've been working for this place for over a year now. I've seen some weird, creepy stuff, and I'm almost always alone because I lock up the building. When this happened, It was around 5 o'clock at night. Everybody was leaving, and I was going to change the outside garbage in the front of the building. I was walking out, and there was this girl sitting on one of the chairs in the lobby, waiting for her ride. I nodded at her and she smiled. I walked out and started changing the bag. Now, the trash can is directly outside of these doors. So, I would have seen anybody walking about. And there are windows everywhere. So I would have seen people get up and leave the room as well. It only takes me 20 seconds to change the bag. I walk back inside with the trash bag full. I look at the chair, and somebody completely different is sitting there. It was also a girl. She notices me staring at her, lost for words, and she gives me a weird look. I ask her, "Was there anyone sitting there when you came in?"
No,
"How long have you been in here?"
I was directly behind you when you walked out.
"You didn't see anyone sitting there, did you? Another girl, maybe?" Her face goes white and concerned with a mix of fear. I was lost for words and walked back in. The girl was nowhere to be found, and I haven't seen her at work since. Keep in mind I have seen a lot of weird stuff and heard weird things in this building. I've even heard my name being whispered through a podcast, with the lights flickering immediately. I kid you not. Number 4.
I've always had an interest in ghosts and the paranormal since I was a kid. When I was young, I used to see things I couldn't explain. One of the most notable times was when I was a kid, sleeping on the top bunk in a room with my brother. I woke up in the middle of the night, not really knowing why. When I looked over the shoulder of the bunk bed, I saw what looked like a chariot floating in the air going from right to left. The chariot was small, probably about the height of my hand. It moved in a snake-like way, slithering up and down like a sound wave or something. In the chariot sat a man and woman dressed in old-style Victorian clothing. The chariot was being drawn by a long row of horses side by side. It is worthwhile to note that the entire chariot was made up of what looked like fluorescent light in different shades of white, teal, green, and red. Once the first pair of horses hit a certain spot in the room, they disappeared, and each pair of horses, and finally the chariot, did the same, almost like they were going into an invisible portal. I would tell my parents about the things I saw, and it led to a few years of counseling. Knowing what I do now about the paranormal, I know that I wasn't in need of counseling at all, as I have no schizophrenic background or anything else that would explain seeing what I did. Skip forward to the age of 16. I had just recently got my driver's license at this time. I went out to go hang out with my friends in the neighboring town, and as night came, I decided I better get home because I still wasn't too fond of driving at night. Regardless, the sun was completely down and dark had come by the time that I left. The roads that take me from my friend's town back to mine are very rural, with either cornfields or forest on either side, no street lights, and hardly any traffic. I turned on the last rural road leading up to my neighborhood and started going up the steep hill on the street. As I reached the top of the hill and made my way over, I saw something strange. On the right side of the road, walking away from me with her back turned, was an old lady walking a small white dog. The lady was wearing a white gown with white high socks for tights and had old gray-white hair. Literally everything about this lady and her dog was pure white. I almost swerved out of shock because this is not a road you ever see anyone walking down. It's a 55-mile-per-hour road with no shoulder in the middle of the countryside. After I passed her, I looked in my window and she had vanished. I want to point out that the area I'm from is inhabited mostly by wealthy families that keep to themselves, so the chance of it being some sort of crackhead or whatever is 1 in a million. After I got home, I went to use the bathroom. I remember clearly thinking in my head, was that a ghost I saw? And as I was thinking that, a bottle of shampoo fell from the top shelf of a cabinet in my bathroom. This could be a coincidence, but never in my 10 years of living there has anything fallen off that shelf. There is a very famous ghost story from around my area, Chicagoland, of a lady called Resurrection Mary. She was hit and killed by a car in my town about an hour away from my house. Since the 1930s, she's been reported seen walking down the road hitchhiking in a white gown with blonde hair. I had not heard of this story until recently, and it got me thinking about the above experience. The description of the Resurrection Mary is pretty damn close to what I saw. I don't think that what I saw was her necessarily, especially considering the distance between her reported location and my sighting, but the similarities shocked me.
Number 5. So let me give you a little backstory. My name is Morgan. I'm a 17-year-old male from Northwest Wales, UK. Me and my friends were going to a castle close to our house to do a Ouija board session. We all live along the same street, so we met at my house and then walked 3 miles to the castle. It was 11 PM and completely dark. You have to walk into the woods and up some very steep inclines. It would take us an hour to reach the tower that we were planning to do the session at. So on with the story. We were about 15 minutes from the tower, and my best friend Cheryl tells us to all stop and listen. Just faintly in the distance, we can hear talking and smell smoke. Cheryl tells us to walk on, but slowly and quietly. After about 15 minutes, we were about 50 feet from the tower, and we could hear some full-blown chanting. As we approach, we see a fire surrounded by people. I tell everyone to stand behind me and be absolutely silent. We tiptoe carefully towards the tower, and we were now at the entrance. I peek my head around and see round about 10 hooded figures around a fire, and what appeared to be a dead dog being burnt. After about a minute of staring in shock, one of the hooded figures spots me. He alerts the others, and before they start coming towards me, I calmly walk away towards my 4 absolutely terrified friends, and quietly say, "Run." And we did. We ran for our lives. I could hear the figures hop behind us. I started to cry and they were not saying anything, they were just running as fast as they could to get us, fully covered in their white hooded robes, with only 2 black slits where their eyes should be. After what felt like about a 5-hour chase, but was actually only 5 minutes, we came to the main path leading out of the castle. I looked behind me one more time and saw the last figures walking backwards towards the tower. We still had another 45 minutes of walking down the path, leading through the woods and out the castle. Presuming we were safe, we sat down and had a cigarette and a beer, and discussed between ourselves that those people were most definitely a cult. When we finally arrived back to the entrance of the castle, we decided to take a taxi home, and on our way there I called the police. I told them about what we saw, and they said they would look into it. The next day when they went to investigate, they found a fire pit and the remains of a dog in the middle, but they never found any trace of who was there. To this day I haven't been back to the castle, and don't plan on going back anytime soon. And to the cult who killed the poor dog and chased us, we all hope that we never see you again. Number 6.
I've been watching a YouTube series about deep web exploration. I won't name the series or the channel it belongs to. I'm not getting paid for advertisements. Anyway, I looked up a video on how to access said deep web. I did it fast and dirty, not much research on what not to do. Big mistake, let me tell you right now. Using Windows on the deep web is a bad idea, that much I did know. Easy to get hacked that way since it's the most prominent OS. I know you can boot up on a live USB on a Linux clone OS, or a simple Google search can tell you how to do that. It's not as difficult as it sounds. But I figured if my laptop gets hacked, I'm screwed. I can't exactly afford to just buy a new one right now, so I thought I'd be smart and use my Android tablet. What a genius, right? Yeah, I know I'm an idiot. A few VPN or virtual private network apps later, and I'm surfing the deep web, looking around like a little kid for an adult store. I have no clue what any of it means, but I'm interested in it all. I'm aware you can find a lot of snuff and pedo rings, so I treaded carefully. Unfortunately, I stumbled upon one of the two. I'm not going to say which. It made me sick to my stomach, and I nearly quit then and there. In fact, I did. For a few minutes. I chalked up to bad luck and resolved to be more careful. I'm not into that shit, not by a long shot. I'm not some deviant with fetishes for snuff or kids. That image will probably be burned into my brain for the rest of my miserable life. Anyway, I'm browsing for a few hours. It's after 3 a.m. I've heard it's better to use the deep web at night, less traffic that way. I found a few interesting sites. There's tons of religious stuff on there. You'd be surprised how often you find Satanists, or at least people who claim to be Satanists. Most of the time, it's likely to be some edgy teenagers rebelling against their religious families. I won't get into my religious views, don't worry. It even has several of its own social networks and email services. No thank you. You're begging to be stalked by some creep if you use one of those. Or better yet, get scammed by a catfish or honeypot. There are loads of conspiracy blogs as well, both interesting and hilarious. Everything from Justin Bieber is secretly a reptilian member of the Illuminati to leaked files on human experimentation. There was even a guy who claimed to have had stumbled across the interdimensional travel via falling into an actual rabbit hole, as in a literal physical hole in the ground made up by a fuzzy wabbit. I'd say you can't make this stuff up, but clearly you can. I was serious about the human experimentation, by the way. You're going to want to avoid that kind of stuff. If you had any faith in humanity, you'd lost it in a heartbeat. Sweet holy hobgoblins, I hope that stuff wasn't legit. I mean, dear God. Gun shops, drug jobs, celebrity nudes, pirated movies, hackers for hire, hitmen, virus programmers, script kiddies, stolen credit cards, you name it. There was one site that sold stolen US currency that was supposed to be marked for shredding due to age or poor condition. Seems like they got a lot of business too. No wonder the economy is in the toilet. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of legitimate stuff on there too. I visited the site of a really smart dude who was creating his own custom OS. He even had games and stuff on it. Funny things too. A mock cult made for people named Dan was among my favorites. The people that weren't maniacs seemed to be open-minded, if a little paranoid. Then I came across a site that supposedly gives you access to the webcams of people's personal laptops. I'm curious. I shouldn't have been, I know. I'm not expecting to see some cam girls here, just some slack-jawed ding-dongs staring blankly at their screens watching Let's Plays or some shit. And that's exactly what I saw. Neckbeards, teenagers, old men looking confused, the works. Here's me, laughing at unexpected people. And then I saw myself. Ha ha, I thought sarcastically. It's tapping into my camera and trying to give me a good scare. It almost did at first. Even so, I logged off. I kinda realized how bad what I was doing was, not to mention how illegal it was. I went back to the clear web and watched some Netflix. Soon enough, I'd forgotten all about my deep web exploits. Then my Skype starts ringing. Another Skype number is calling me. I think maybe it's one of my friends trying it out. I've been pestering one of them for a while to get on Skype so we can chat while playing games on Steam, so I pick it up. At first there was silence, and then I heard a voice. A man's voice. He sounded like he was an older guy, 50 plus. "Looking good," he said. Without a second's hesitation, I hung up, deleted every deep web related app on my tablet, shut down, and restarted my router. I have no freaking clue how that guy got my Skype number, and to be quite honest, I don't want to know how. All I know is that if you're going to use the deep web, I beg of you, for your own safety, do more research than I did. Talk to someone who has experience in setting up a proper VPN or some other kind of anonymity. You're sure as hell not gonna find it on freaking Google Play.
Number 7. I had dinner with a few friends, and afterwards I started to go back to the Upper East Side where I live. I had just gotten off the subway, and when I was about to go up to the street I noticed a young girl. She was in her mid-20s and I noticed that she was pregnant. Being the sensitive person that I am, I kept looking at her and debated if I should say something. In the few seconds I stood there, she noticed I kept looking at her, and she approached me. Let me just say that it was about 12 degrees Saturday night in New York, and this girl was wearing a t-shirt. Just a t-shirt. I became concerned that she was in trouble. She introduced herself as Katie and told me that she was 7 months pregnant and homeless. She asked if I could get her a hot chocolate or any other hot beverage from the D&D down the street. I didn't want to be insensitive, because that's not the kind of person that I am. So I offered to give her cash instead, and quite honestly, I was tired and just wanted to go home, but I did want to help her. Now this is the part where it gets weird. I take up my purse, and she clearly sees that I have some cash in there. However, she just declines, and says that she would much rather prefer the hot drink. This was my first red flag. "I'm sorry about your situation," I say, "and I wish I could do more to help you, but I really have to go home." I said that, and held out a $20 bill. But she kept insisting, telling me that it was only a few blocks away. I again told her that I couldn't, and held out the money, but she once again declined. This is the point where I start to see that she's getting aggravated and apologise again, wish her well, and begin to leave. As I walk away, my curiosity gets the better of me. I see her leaving and going to the opposite direction of the D&D. That's when I decided to follow her. Something about this girl was off, and I wanted to see what she was up to. She was probably 5'4", and I'm a 5'10" female athlete. The streets we were walking on were crowded, and I managed to remain unseen as I followed her. After maybe 5 minutes, she turned a corner and went up a street. The street was seriously shady as shit. It was dark and completely empty. I decided to stay back, but kept looking around the corner, only to see her go into what seemed to be an alleyway. I slowly walked to the corner of where the alley was, and carefully looked to see Katie with 3 men and another girl talking. They were at the far end of the alley, so I managed to remain unseen. There was also what appeared to be a van. I couldn't tell, but it looked like a small U-Haul van. I listened attentively to their conversation, and only managed to make out a few important details. Katie was arguing, saying that next time she wanted them to go out in the freezing cold only wearing a t-shirt, and that it didn't work with the other girl last night either. Then I heard a man reply, saying that she needed to be more convincing, and she yelled back at him saying that she's not wearing a pregnant belly again, and how much more convincing could she possibly get? That's when I carefully peek around the corner and see Katie taking off the fake pregnant belly she was wearing. And at that moment my heart sank. I almost fell into a trap. I begin to walk away and relaxed a little when I got to a crowded street. When I got home, I called my friend and told him what happened. He grew up in the city, and he told me that he's heard of many people who do things like that. But I don't think they wanted to rob me, because if that was the case, why didn't Katie just take my wallet when I took it out? I've walked past that area almost every day, and I have never seen her since. I don't know what their plans were, but I certainly doubt that they were positive. So Katie and her weird cult, whatever. Let's not meet again. Number 8.
My little sister used to talk to herself a lot when she was around 4. My dad asked her who she was talking to, and she said it was a little boy and gave a description. He figured it was just an imaginary friend, so he ignored it. A few months later, he was reading her a book about the history of the town, and she stopped on a page with a family and pointed to the youngest boy and said, "I know him. That's the boy I've been playing with." I flipped to the next page. Picture of our house. The kid died there. When she was turning 6 and had to make a wish blowing out the candles, she went from happy and excited to stoic and said in a flat voice, "I wish everyone was dead," then blew out the candles.
Number 9. To first start off, I lived in a medium-sized house and shared a room with my brother. The room had a window on the right side looking into my backyard, and the room was at ground level. It was going to be the last week that we were living in that house after about 8 or 9 years. During the beginning few days of this week, strange things began to happen, like tapping, creaking, etc. Me and my brother weren't really fussed by it, as the house was pretty old. About 4 days into the week, I woke up in the middle of the night with my TV on to static. I turned my TV off and went back to bed, when suddenly I was woken up when I heard something outside. I saw a dark figure pass my window. Me being a kid, as this was quite a while ago, I was frozen in fear and didn't move a muscle. After about 15 minutes of petrifying fear, I realised my brother was awake too, so him and I ran to our parents' room. They told us it was nothing and to go to bed, so we did. The next day at the same time, I woke up to the sound of water running in our bathroom. I got scared shitless, but had to stand up and turn the water off. As I got into the bathroom and turned off the faucet, I saw the same figure I had seen from the previous night staring at me through the small window. I remember its piercing eyes to this day. It was so dark I couldn't see its body clearly. It looked almost human, besides the fact that its eyes were glowing white, and it felt like they were piercing into my soul. I bolted out the bathroom, woke up my brother, and gunned it upstairs to my parents' room again. My dad was pissed that we woke him up again, so he decided to check out what was outside himself. He was horrified at what he saw on the camera. The cameras caught a glimpse of a black figure walk in frame before all cameras went to static. My dad didn't want to call the police, as they would have thought it insane trying to explain a monster was stalking his kids. The next morning I woke up and asked my brother if anything had happened to him the nights prior to what happened to us. He said he had woken up but not seen anything. The next couple of nights were eventless, but we kept alert to make sure nothing happened in the night. It was the final night before we moved out. I was woken up again, at the same exact time as my brother. It's almost as if we were in sync. The creature was directly outside of our window, staring at us with its white eyes. My brother screamed as loud as he could, and our dad ran out with the gun and shot the figure. Right before he shot though, the figure punched the window, leaving a shattered fist mark in the window glass. Then the figure ran around the corner of the house, leaving no blood trail and no evidence besides the broken window. My parents called the police and explained what happened. The police officer said that there had been multiple calls with the same figure around the local area. We moved out the very next morning after trashing the broken window. We left the city and never saw the house or creature again. Maybe it was something or someone that didn't want us to leave. But all I know is that I will never go back to that house again. Number 10.
I hired a guy to hack into my ex-wife's Gmail account. Feel free to judge me all you want. Of course, it's against the law. Of course, it's a violation of her privacy. Why else would I be using a throwaway account? But there were some emails I sent to her while we were still together, things we promised to keep between the two of us. They didn't involve any illegal activity. Having said that, the subject matter was very personal, and given how ugly and nasty the divorce had been going, I have no idea what she might do with the messages. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. I was determined to find a way into her account to get rid of every message she could use to publicly shame me. I didn't know the first thing about hacking, but I knew you could hire people to do it for you. Obviously, these guys didn't advertise on the yellow pages, but as I soon found out, they're easy to find as long as you're willing to venture into the deep web. I had downloaded a Tor browser a few months prior, but every time I thought about using it, I chickened out. But that was for good reasons. I'd heard that in the deep web you might find child pornography pop up on your browser, even when you're not looking for it. Well, last night I got pretty drunk and said fuck it, rather than a deluge of child porn. Turns out it's organized pretty well, for what is basically an underground internet crime syndicate. I saw links to sites where you could buy drugs, download snuff films, and even hire assassins. Eventually I found what I was looking for, a message board called Hackers for Hire. I made a post outlining the details of what I wanted done. I got a surprisingly quick reply from a guy named X. Yep, that's his whole username, just X. All he said was that he'd get in touch with me tomorrow. This morning I woke up with a brutal hangover, an immediate sense of regret for what I'd done last night, and a new message in my Reddit inbox. It was a message from X himself. I had no idea why a hacker would PM somebody on Reddit, unless he was hiding behind like 7 proxies. But I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. For all I know, that isn't even possible. Here's a screenshot of it. Right away I knew something was up because his username was, well, just check the screenshot. It's one fucking letter. Reddit has never allowed one-letter usernames. Believe it or not, the link in his PM is a link to this sub, specifically the thread for this week's top-rated post. I'm guessing many of you have read it. It's called "Loved Seeing You Last Week. Thank you for fixing my computer." Every other post on here looks normal, but the one he linked me to is glitchy. The text keeps changing, but it happens so fast that I can't figure out what he's trying to say. Maybe it's the address for a meetup? Well, that was the first thought that came to mind. But it only took me a moment to realize how dumb it was. Most likely this guy is in China or Romania or who the fuck knows where. I noticed the screen changes weren't random. It was like the same pattern on loop. So I took a screen recording. Here it is. I would greatly appreciate it if one of you guys could tell me what it means, if anything. I understand if you're repulsed by him even asking, given what I did yesterday. He tried to run.
Number 11. My daughter told me this story when she was around 4 years old. This is as close as I can remember from her exact wording, and I tell it from her perspective.
I was with my old family that I lived with before, and they were very, very mean people. My mum was dead because they didn't like her anymore, and my dad and my brother hated me. They tied me to a chair in the basement, beat me, stuck things in me, and never fed me. Sometimes I would get free and would have to eat dirt and bugs. They let their friends do stuff to me too.
What kind of stuff?
Bad stuff, I can't say, but it was bad. Their friends later killed my bad dad and bad brother and stole me away. They chained me to their wall and threw knives at me and burned me with sticks from their fire. When they got tired of my crying, they held my throat until I died. When they cut me up into little tiny pieces and put me in the blender, then they found Mummy and made her drink me, and that's how I was born.
Well, that's quite a sadistic dream, sweetheart.
It wasn't a dream, Daddy. That's what really happened.
There were other stories she told me about her old family, and none of them were very good. It wasn't just the stories, though. It was the absolute certainty with which she told the stories, the very same matter-of-fact way in which each story was related. It still gives me chills. Number 12.
This just happened recently. A guy made a Craigslist posting saying that he was a talent scout and ran an agency. He got the interest of a father, grandfather, and his granddaughter. This guy's specialty was casting families, preferably children, under the guise that he was looking to produce a film and needed actors. Not too long ago, the grandfather and his granddaughter went to meet this guy up at the house. They actually drove about 2 hours early to check out the house before going to it. There was a for sale sign outside the house and it appeared to be vacant. The family drove by later at the agreed time of meeting in the morning and were greeted at the door by a man in a suit. He tried to convince the little girl to come inside many times. The grandfather got a bad feeling and left. Turns out, in an unrelated sting, the police caught this guy for child porn charges. He had 10 counts of child porn and his home was raided. The father and granddaughter, around the same time, reported this incident to the police. When the police found this guy, he had a bag with him. In it was a knife, zip ties, sex toys, and he even had plastic sheeting. He was going to pretty much kill the grandfather and then rape and murder the child. His plan was to get this all on film. The camera was set up and ready to go. Luckily, the father and grandfather had a gut feeling something was off and reported the incident. This guy happened to be a kid I pretty much grew up knowing for about 15 years. He was even my brother's roommate for a while. He was always very creepy, and I could never pinpoint exactly why. I felt my stomach drop reading this news. The guy had been inside my home, went to parties I had, my birthday party. I've had multiple conversations with him. Luckily, he won't be getting out of jail anytime soon.
Number 13. To clarify, I am a 25-year-old woman. This happened to me about a year ago. I work in a busy area outside of a major city. There is a Walgreens on one corner, a McDonald's on the other, and then 2 gas stations on opposite sides of the street. My co-workers and I frequent these convenience stores for their, well, conveniences. One hot summer's day, I was entering Walgreens on my lunch break. Right when I walked in, I saw a middle-aged man, Hispanic looking, standing near the entrance. He was heavy-set with tattoos all down his arm. They were prominent because he was wearing a tank top. I ignored him like I do most strangers and just moved on. I came to the toilet paper aisle and noticed that this tank top dude was slowly coming down the same aisle as I was. Here we go, I thought. Immediate creep alert is going off in my mind. So I moved on to the refrigerated section just to see if he would follow me. And sure enough, there he is. But this time he approaches me. "That's a sweet tattoo you have there," as he pointed to my foot tattoo, which is 2 large Persian buttercups. I gave a short "thanks" and continued on nonchalantly. He kept it up. "Where did you get a beautiful tattoo like that?" "My friend from high school is an artist. Have a nice day," I said bluntly, clearly showing no interest in conversation. I paid for my items and left. Tank top homeboy had to leave the store right at the same moment as me, but without purchasing anything. He follows after me and calls out for me. He comes up and asks, "You must be 16, right? Still in high school?" I respond with a grunt. "I know a way that pretty girls like you can make a lot of money. And it's nothing like you're thinking. It's a very high-class service, where all you need to do is look pretty and go on dates with very rich men. Really classy. They will pay for your entire night, and you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. Just make them look really good. All you gotta do is answer, sweet angel. We need young pretty girls such as yourself." More than fear, I felt anger. This prick was preying on young girls for goodness knows what. Immediately my mind goes to trafficking. I respond with, "Sir, I am 25 years old and I'm not interested in escorting. I suggest you stop asking underage girls to join your services, because I'm sure the police will be aware of your presence after today." I walked away feeling pretty good about myself, hoping I had helped some girls in the future who maybe didn't have the ability to say no. I get back to work and start telling all my co-workers about the creepy experience. Everyone was mostly listening and laughing at it, not taking it very seriously. One co-worker who does live in the area became grey in the face, and her eyes widened. Not only had the same man tried to talk to her, but he gave her the exact same line about being young and joining his escort service the week prior. He ran into her at the gas station across the street and followed her around about the same way. She naturally looks young, partially because she has braces and is my age. Not hating on adult braces, we work in orthodontics. The pit of my gut sank. This dude was hanging out on our corner trying to solicit underage girls on a daily basis. Immediately my co-worker called the police, and we both gave our stories to them. We never found out what happened to him, but I haven't seen him on the corner since. There are police blockages on that corner now at least once a week, so let's hope he gets caught. I hope I've played a slight part in that, but I really hope he isn't out there harming teenage girls. So tank top underage escort pimp, let's not meet again. Number 14.
I live in a rural part of Kentucky. There's not much to do here for a couple of bored teenagers. You always hear about local urban legends. Every town has one or two. And my town is no different. There is a distillery in a remote part of the area. It sits by the Kentucky River on a stretch of road out in the middle of nowhere. Kids in the area love to throw parties there. One of my friends, Jay, was one of these kids. Jay moved to our school in the middle of the year. He knew everyone, and everyone knew him. During a dull math lecture, Jay and I started talking about local myths surrounding the area. There are quite a few. Jay starts telling me about a distillery he used to throw parties at. He says that he's had rumors that a cult meets there, and he continues to tell me weird experiences he's had there. Everything from dolls being nailed to the walls inside the distillery to a homeless guy shooting at him down there. I decided I wanted to check it out. Jay, a few friends, and I decided to go to the distillery the following weekend and explore the area around it. Our plan was for me to drive my car and Jay to drive his car. We had a total of 8 people going with us, and for me to follow Jay there. Friday comes, and the whole day at school we're getting psyched up for our trip. At about 10 that night, we all meet and saddle up. I follow Jay in his car with my 4 passengers, and Jay drives his car with 2 passengers. We drove for what seemed like forever, about 45 minutes. I didn't even know if we were in the same town. Jay turned his car onto a little 2-lane road. The road seemed pretty normal, no sign of anything out of the ordinary. I kept following Jay's car down this road for about another 5 minutes. That's when things started getting weird. The road got smaller, and we passed a street sign that just had the word hell spray painted on it. We passed a couple of houses that had weird red lights on the inside, and a few houses that looked like they were falling apart. A little bit further, we passed the distillery and took a left up another holler. This road was even crazier. It was almost straight up a mountain with no guardrail on the side. If we were to swerve off this road, we were dead. We get to the top of the hill and keep following this road until we came upon a gravel driveway. Jay stopped in his car. "This is it," he said, and got out of his car and walked over to mine. I noticed some strange things right off the bat. The driveway leads up to a huge house surrounded by trees. In the trees, I noticed ropes hanging from them. They looked like nooses. There were signs posted everywhere about shooting anyone who came on the property. I also noticed a weird rock formation in a clearing of trees off to the side of the road, almost like a Stonehenge type deal. After talking to Jay for a little while about the route we were taking to go back home, we noticed lights coming down the drive. A few of them. "Drive! Drive!" Jay shouted as he took off back to his car. I immediately floored it. I left Jay and his passengers in the dust. I almost hit 3 deer that jumped out in front of the car. My buddy in the back seat started asking us if we had seen those things behind us. I asked him what he was talking about, and he said that there was what looked like dogs in the road behind us. He said they looked like dogs, but they were way too big to be dogs. We got back down and stopped at the Waffle House to rehash what had just happened. Jay said that he had seen a few dirt bikes and ATVs coming down the drive and didn't want to be around when they got there. Could this have been the cult that everyone was talking about? I may never know, but if it was, let's not meet again.
Number 15. I'm a 17-year-old male living in New South Wales, Australia. I'm half Asian and, in a way, a bit female looking. I'm around average height and quite thin, and I have what you call emo-esque hair. This will be important later. This happened about 2 days ago. I live in your typical Australian suburb. Nothing out of the ordinary on Australia. Where I live, there is a lot of heavily wooded areas, as well as very swampy areas. So me, in all my infinite wisdom, decided to go for a walk. The area I went isn't frequently travelled to, as it's very rural. It is where the new housing estates are being built. I love this area for its picturesque and quietness. Now I'm walking around listening to music. It's about 40-ish minutes from my house as well, and you have a lot of bushland to go through. I should also mention that my neighbourhood backs onto an industrial estate which is in decline. I walk there, it's quite a normal day, until I see what appears to be a bunch of construction workers talking to each other and occasionally glancing at me. I think nothing of it and keep on my merry way. Now this area is my safe haven. It's on the fringe of what used to be the industrial estate and the new homes. This is where I always sat and looked into the distance. There was always a fence, and I never went past it because of the barbed wire that was on top of it. But this day, I felt adventurous, and saw that there was a gap in the fence that led beyond. I checked on the workers in case they saw me, and as they weren't, I went through. This is where I began to walk for a solid 7 minutes into the area. I then sat down to admire the view, and the grass was very long. That is when I heard a male voice.
"Where did it get to?"
I was freaked out a little bit by this. It was a reserve, so I thought, what do I do? I'm caught. So I dashed away into taller grass. I heard another male then say,
"We know you're here. Come out. You're not in trouble."
I was in full panic mode. Like, who would say that, especially to a stranger? I glanced over at the people calling out to me, and no surprise, they were the workers from the site. I assumed they must have followed me when I thought they disappeared.
Come out, little rabbit. We won't hurt you. Well, not that much,"
said a raspy voice. I glanced at these workers. One of these had a roll of duct tape, another one rope, and a female had a large wrench. I was taught as a kid how to get away from strangers in cars, but absolutely nothing of this caliber. I grab a piece of large sandstone from the ground and I hurl it into the grass far away from me. They go running like stupid idiots, I thought myself. I book it down through the long grass and climb the fence to the industrial estate. Just as I'm climbing over the fence, I see the workers on the top of the hill pointing towards me. They leg it and start yelling,
Oi! Come back here!
I proceed to nope it out of there and get back to my house. Luckily, I haven't seen these people since. But what frightens me the most is that I'm pretty sure that they thought I was a girl. I didn't know what their intentions were, but they definitely weren't good at all. So creepy, obviously fake workmen. Let's not meet again. Number 16.
When I was 6, 28 years ago, my mom and dad took me and my younger sister to an MLB game, leaving my grandmother to babysit my youngest sister. When we got back, my grandmother told my folks that 2 guys had come by the house with photography equipment and asked whether a young girl with red curly hair lived there. They said that they had spotted her and that she would be a great child model for some advertising work that they were doing. When my grandmother said that she wasn't home, they said they would come back another time. My grandmother and mom didn't think much about it, but my dad said, "Something's not right here," and called the police. 15 minutes later, several FBI agents showed up and began conducting interviews with my grandmother and my parents, while I ran around and showed the agents my Matchbox police helicopter. Turns out we had been targeted by a child theft ring. The photographers would take a bunch of photos and wait until the toddler threw a tantrum, and the photographers would then ask the mother to grab a toy to keep the child entertained. While the mother was out of the room, they would grab the child and bolt, leaving everything else behind. The FBI told my folks that my sister had already been sold and would have been out of the country within 24 hours if they got her. We were advised to change preschools and other aspects of our daily routine. It still gives me the chills to think about what could have happened to her. Needless to say, Mom became very overprotective. It was a few years before she even trusted us with a babysitter.
Number 17. This takes place over the course of the first semester of my senior year of high school. Being a lonely girl at the time, I didn't have many friends, and became rather attached to people I believed to be my friends. So anyway, there's a boy that I had a crush on who we will call Keith. He was the silent genius of the school, who knew a lot about a lot, but never took the initiative to participate in class or take his classwork seriously, usually reading a book, doing that evening's homework when he cared enough, or browsing the internet on our school-issued laptops during class. So one day in English class, I'm sitting next to him in the back row of desks, when our teacher pairs us up to work on a project together. Keith, seeming disinterested, looks at me and then looks back at his laptop to continue whatever it was that he was doing when I tried talking to him. Finally, we began to talk. He was rather quick to open up to me about stuff. I thought he might have been interested in me by the way he smiled at me, whilst talking about things that I didn't even know about. His vocabulary was extensive, and he was funny too. This was a side to him that I'd never seen before, and felt like I was growing to like him even more than I did before. So we began working on our project when the bell rings, and we have to go our separate ways. I didn't see him for the rest of the day, but I really wanted to. I had a crush on this boy, and whenever I saw him in the hallways I would smile. He even came and sat next to me at lunch one day, and my heart almost leapt out of my mouth. He was outgoing with my friends, and they quickly liked him too. They asked if he was my boyfriend, despite me wishing it was true though. I denied it. During my astronomy class one day, I was surprised to see Keith come in, despite him not being part of our class. He told our teacher that he had switched classes, and the teacher confirmed it. Awesome! I get to see more of him. He smiled at me and sat down in his seat and the class resumed, during which we exchanged looks and smiles. Everything went fine for about a month. Keith and I had exchanged phone numbers during this period, and we'd hung out during the weekends on a regular basis. I was waiting for him to ask me out, but he never did. I really felt disappointed about that. Then one day in English class, Keith gets up to use the bathroom, and I decide to look at his laptop. Overly attached friend, I know, don't remind me. Keith always took his time in the bathroom, so I felt safe enough looking through it without him coming in out of nowhere and seeing me. I opened up several folders on his desktop to find nothing but schoolwork and the occasional photo of his favourite sports team. Then I opened a folder called Anatomy and Physiology. Keith had told me his school schedule in the past, and he didn't actually have this class. So I got curious and opened it up. I was shocked after opening a photo file to see a picture of a dead girl laying in the ground, naked. I felt my heart drop as I opened a Microsoft Word file called AMPHW and found a list of websites that I don't even want to recount on here. I felt like I had to open up one more photo, which was the last one in the folder. I almost cried as I opened it to see that it was a photo of me, the one that he took of me when he came over to my house. Except he had photoshopped blood onto my body and the letter X over my eyes. I shrieked in horror and jumped back into my seat. The teacher somehow not hearing me, but several students did and asked me what was wrong. I began to cry and asked to go see the guidance counsellor. As I walked past the restrooms, I didn't see Keith. When I got there, I waited until he came out and I could speak to him about Keith. He didn't believe me at first, thinking I was doing it for attention, but eventually told me that he would talk to him. I didn't hear anything afterwards for the rest of the year, but one day, Keith was absent from school and never returned. Number 18.
So like every other edgy, bored teenager during the peak years of internet freedom, I got myself into some stuff I had no business poking around in. People talk about the glory days when internet anonymity was real and you could do all kinds of illegal things, but those people are full of shit. Anonymity online or otherwise is a fucking joke. I learned that the hard way the summer I graduated from high school. I was held back in the 3rd grade after a really serious illness kept me hospitalized for almost 6 months, so my friends graduated the year before me. My senior year sucked. I was alone and it was too late to make new friends, so I skipped a lot of classes and spent most of my time online playing games and talking to my friends through AIM. It was actually a really dark period in my life that I try not to think too much about. And because I haven't ever tried to repeat my deep web exploration, I forgot about a lot of the stuff I did. I do remember though, that it was my friend Brian who got me into the deep web exploration. We were all obsessed with 4chan, B specifically, and an Anon who had taught him how to use Tor safely. He'd been mentioning it for a while and I got curious. I asked him about it and he made it sound like it was a utopia for people like us, who were tech savvy and well, nerdy. You could find anything, he said. Any porn you could imagine was yours for the viewing. There were sites offering drugs, which you could purchase and have delivered anywhere into the world. He had been a part of a few raids too, and I admit, it all sounded like a lot of fun. So I downloaded Tor, and he taught me how to access the hidden wiki and some other neat sites. It ended up taking over my life. It was like being a kid in a candy store. Suddenly, I had access to unlimited movies, games, porn, information of any kind. I stayed away from the really nasty sites, like Violent Desires, and anything that had even the slightest hint of containing child porn. Of course, it's impossible to avoid that kind of thing down here, so I saw a fair share. If I'm being honest, it never bothered me much. Neither did all the very graphic gore. I'm not ill-adjusted or anything, but I've never liked kids that much, and I'd long since been desensitized by gore. I made it a point to report what I could and move on, but it never stuck with me. After the school year ended, I had 3 months to pass before going to college, and I basically became a shut-in. I spent almost all my time hopping from site to site, seeing what was down there. Most of it was just backdoors to existing sites, but it was still fun to fuck around with things and be a general asshole. I still talked to my friends and they moved on to WoW, and Brian in particular spent less time on the deep web than I did. However, one evening he messaged me and told me he found a way to view sites based on location. I have no idea how he did this, and if he told me, I quickly forgot. I assume it was some kind of script, but maybe that's not right. Either way, he showed me how to use it, and I started poking around sites that were registered in my state. Most weren't anywhere close to me, so I was just opening tabs, browsing quickly, and moving on. Eventually, I came across a site that was registered to someone about 2 hours from me, and I opened the page. Whoever had created the site didn't know much about design. The layout was wonky and incredibly ugly, and it took me a while to figure out how to navigate around. The links were the same color as the background, which was just a black screen with the words #1 devotee repeated over and over, and highlighting had been disabled, so I had to tab to find any of the links. One took me to a chat that was very active, with people posting every couple seconds. The usernames were all generic male names like Brad or Tim, and they were all talking about someone they called Perfection. It was really bizarre. I read the chat for a while, and literally all anyone talked about was how amazing Perfection was and how they admired everything he did. I wondered if I'd come across some kind of weird community that idolized a celebrity. It made me laugh a little, so I kept poking around while keeping the chat open in a separate window. One link led to a bunch of sound clips that were about 30 seconds in length. After listening to a few, I realized they were all just random sounds. A car door shutting, a toilet flushing, the sound of a man clearing his throat, typing. One was of terrible quality, but I could make out a baby fussing. Holy shit, these people were really dedicated. I imagined one of the members creeping up the house of whoever it was they were obsessed with and recording any sound they could and bring it back to their community like a treasure. I tried to figure out who Perfection was, but it was strange. His real name was never mentioned anywhere I looked. Another link took me to some kind of digital archive that contained downloads. Warily, I clicked one of them and downloaded it. I opened up a document that was almost 500 pages long, and it seemed to be some kind of novel about growing up with Perfection. I only skimmed through it, but the general gist seemed to be that Perfection and the narrator were obsessed with each other. It read like any old awful fanfiction. I closed it out and downloaded another file. This one contained what looked like hand-drawn blueprints for a house with the rooms labeled with things like our studio, second kitchen for quarantined food. The latter struck me because I'm a celiac and I know all about quarantining food. Whoever it was, they had some kind of allergy too. Other documents contained inventories of strange items like Q-tips, clean and dirty, fruit rinds, cups, bits of fabric, and used tissues. I was starting to get really skeeved out. Whoever these people were, they took their obsession a little too seriously for my taste. There was even a forum dedicated to Perfection which had thousands of threads and even more replies, all having to do with this person. It was overwhelming in a way. As I opened another link which led me to a gallery of photos, I checked the chat and found, to my surprise, that it had stopped completely. No new messages had been posted in at least 5 minutes, and I felt a pang of paranoia. Did they know I was here? Would they be angry? I typed a quick, "Hello, just browsing, don't mind me in the chat box," and went back to the gallery. A little ding signaled a reply, but I ignored it and waited for the first image to load. It was a very grainy shot of a woman with a baby. They were exiting the hospital, the woman in a wheelchair. She looked down into the baby's face as the nurse pushed her towards the curb. The woman was familiar, but I couldn't place her, and the photo was of such poor quality that it was impossible to make out any defining features. The next photo showed the same woman and child playing in their living room. The baby was on its back, reaching up toward a hanging toy. Every photo I opened was of the woman and baby, but I noticed that as the series went on, the baby began to age and the woman was featured less and less. And some of the photos were incredibly strange. Some were zoomed in on the item the child was holding, almost to the point of being completely out of focus. Others were of footprints or broken branches. One of a used potty chair, almost like the one I'd had when I was a kid that had been taken outside onto the lawn. Whoever was taking the photo was holding a piece of stool in their hand. This is when I really got unnerved. Clearly, the community that ran this site was obsessed to the point of madness about this person, Perfection, and suddenly I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. I closed the window and the chat pinged again. This time I checked it. "Are you proud of this world?" The message was from a user named Steve. I frowned and typed back, "What? You must be so proud. What do you think?" I had no idea what to say. I hesitated. They typed another message. "It's okay, don't be shy. My house is your house. Look around. It sure is something. You guys are really obsessed with this guy." There was a brief pause. "Who is he anyway?" Another user replied this time, someone named Bob. "He is perfection. He is God. I live my life to serve him so that one day he may grace me with his approval. This world is far too filthy for him. I must continue to create our utopia." These people were fucking crazy. Clearly, I stumbled onto some kind of community of super fans and I felt a little angry. "How do you know he even wants you guys to do this? This is a pretty huge invasion of privacy." Someone else replied, Terry, "We are in love. Those who keep us apart will be destroyed." I typed faster. "He doesn't even know who any of you are, you fucking idiots. Get a grip. The whole self-insert thing is cringy enough, but this is all so fucking over the top." Steve replied again. "What have I done to upset you?" "Nothing. I just think it's fucking weird that a bunch of random people have been apparently spying on someone and stealing their photos and stuff. There's only room for the two of us." The message caught me off guard, but before I could reply, every user I'd been talking to replied simultaneously. "Are you proud of me?" I felt a weird wriggling in my gut. Something was wrong. "Does this house suit your needs, Perfection?" I started to type back, but it was like someone struck the back of my head with a hammer. My heart was hammering as I reopened the gallery of photos. The hospital photo was grainy, but suddenly the woman came into focus and I made a choked sound of alarm. I scrolled to the bottom of the gallery and opened the newest photo, which had been posted only an hour before. It was of a closed door in a hallway, light seeping under the door and illuminating the walls just enough to see my framed Batman poster and the distinctive paint smear above the doorknob where I brushed a wet paint roller by mistake a year before. I frantically pored over the item catalog and found the listing for the red sweatshirt I'd lost as a toddler. I found the stuffed toys I'd thrown out or donated over the years, the condoms I'd flushed down the toilet in 9th grade, 20 pounds of feces taken from our septic tank and contained in a large plastic drum. I found my 8th grade report card and my Valentine I'd thrown in the gutter the same year out of crippling anxiety. The chat pinged again. "I love you more than you will ever know. You are my perfection." I sat numbly as messages began spamming the chat, all from different users. "I love you. I love you. You are God. I'll never leave you. Perfection. Perfection. Love you. My Lord and Savior. Never leave you." I ripped the power cord out of the wall and flew out of my chair. I closed every curtain in the house and locked every door. I opened every cupboard in the closet and looked under every piece of furniture until I was sure I was alone, and then I curled up under a blanket in the farthest, darkest corner of my closet and went out to sleep for some kind of shock response. When I woke up, I took my computer apart and buried it in the woods behind my house. I told my parents that it suffered a fatal short circuit and had caught fire. They brought me a new laptop, but I could only bring myself to use it when the internet was disabled. I never found out who Devotee was. I developed agoraphobia and I rarely left my apartment. It's been almost 5 years, but I still take my trash to the dump and have it incinerated. When I do go out in public, I wear large hats and sunglasses. I do everything I can to blend in and stay under the radar. My computer was unearthed and taken from its grave, but I'm not sure when. I hope I never find out. And I still panic whenever things go missing around the house.
Number 19. My father was a lumberjack with his own company. He was a real entrepreneur in the industry, and most of the logs and whatnot that we imported to the main city were from his neck of the woods. I grew up in the forest, and we had quite a bit of money as we were growing up, and we lived in this beautiful, intricate mansion in the heart of the neighbouring forest. We were miles out from any bordering residences, and so I was quite introvert, and was one of those weird kids that develops a love for dancing in the rain and watching amphibious creatures do their thing for hours on end in the creek running directly through our backyard. Basically, what I'm saying is that I found myself alone much of the time. This isn't against my parents for letting me be this way. I just preferred my haven of space. So when I was about to start grade school, I knew our house was special. My mother even said so constantly. This house is a blessing. So I had a hero worshipping going thing on, and I never really wanted to leave. I never wanted to drive to the city to start kindergarten and socialise with kids who wouldn't comprehend my introspective reality. Mom told me I had to go, as I was assuming most people would understandably tell their kids, but I wasn't having any of it. And the night before I was supposed to start school, I decided to run away. I took the new backpack that my mum had gotten me and stuffed it full of clothes and fruit snacks. Our house was so unnecessarily large that you could stomp about on the base floor without anyone hearing you until they were about halfway down the first flight of stairs. I took advantage of that and grabbed all the sugary stuff that my mum wouldn't let me have more than once a day and let myself out the front door. I had made a choice to live with all the creatures that I watched on a daily basis, figuring they would be the only ones who would understand me. As I walked deeper and deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to grow and tower over me the further I went in, and what made it worse was that it seemed to have a noise cancellation effect. The hum of the woods and the slight sounds here and there of the animals seemed to completely die, as I was left with disturbing, soft quiet. Even at 5, I knew something was not right about this. I found a tree with a hive-like structure at its roots and nestled into it, laying my sole blanket over the top of myself whilst I tried to sleep. And in case you couldn't tell, that was not on the cards. After I'd been laying there for about 40 minutes, I started to relax and feel my eyes drooping. It had to be later than midnight at that point, but I can't say for certain. Anyhow, the noiseless environment actually began to comfort me to sleep, and it was just when the dream started to open in my head that I heard the first whisper. My eyes popped open and I held my breath, listening for it again. I was more surprised than anything else. Really. Especially because I had gone almost an hour in this wild silence. I didn't hear what it had said. I just knew that there had been this curiosity for me to sit up against the tree trunk to try and hear the voice. "Come here," it said. I turned and I realised it wasn't coming from the tree. I scanned upwards until I see the glimmering whiteness of an eyeball staring at me. An abnormally large squirrel, maybe the size of a house cat, hung by its tail over the branch, calmly smiling at me, with human white teeth and human eyes. It opened its mouth and barely spoke. "Come deeper, child." My breath hitched and I froze. The creature opened its paw and its long claws, that were about a foot long each, reached down and grabbed the tree. It started to crawl towards me, painfully slow, and its eyes got wider with each inch it took towards me. The calm it had before seemed to fade as an excitement was evoked with the increasing tempo of its eager pants. And that's where I found myself sprinting back home. I hadn't realised how far I'd gone into the woods until I was fighting for every breath I took and lunge in return. I could be manufacturing this, but I swear I heard deep clawing of the earth following me, with a speed that I can only imagine with those impossibly elongated talons. I burst through the threshold and the noise came about again. It was shocking. I almost faltered in my run to lounge in the comfort of it, but I could see my front door, and I wasn't staying there any longer. I skipped over the creek, where I took note of a strange collection of frogs sitting in a uniform line staring out of the woods, and I slammed the front door behind me. My parents still weren't up. I looked out the windows to see the frogs still in a line, and that figure in the distance, maybe where it had crossed that threshold, pacing like a wild, hungry predator. It was larger than a squirrel, at the very least, but I could still see from the bright white eyes, those human eyes, and I don't know why it felt this way. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was something else, but some part of me knew that those eyes were stolen. I didn't go to sleep that night, and I made a promise to myself. I would never go back into the woods, never past the creek. Number 20.
This was my mom's story to me one afternoon when I got home from high school. I could tell something was wrong as soon as I saw her. She was visibly upset, so I asked her what happened. For background, she was an interior decorator, and part of her job was sketching out crude floor plan drawings and measuring rooms for flooring. So she gets a call from a lady that is updating her home and wants new flooring, and asks Mom to come take a look at the home, offer suggestions, and take measurements. After arranging a time to meet, the lady tells her that she can't make it, or will be late, but no worries. The house will be unlocked and there won't be anyone there. This seems a little odd, but my mom goes anyway. The house is a typical 1940s bungalow and in need of some updates, but otherwise well kept. My mom knocks, nobody's home, so she lets herself in as instructed. She starts her routine of sketching and measuring and hears a noise come from the house like a doorknob rattle. Being engrossed in her work, she second guesses her hearing and continues working. A few minutes go by and she definitely hears it again. So she calls out, "Hello? Anyone home?" But there's no reply. Then she hears the unmistakable sounds of a doorknob turning and a door swinging open, creaking and all while lightly brushing the carpet as it opens. At this point, she's a little frightened because she was supposed to be alone, she thought. As she waits silently, she can hear the shuffle of footsteps coming up the hallway toward the room she's in. From the hallway emerges this little old gray-haired lady in a muumuu and house slippers. Mom is a little relieved that it isn't an axe murder or anything, so she greets the old lady and apologizes for disturbing her. The lady ignored Mom, continued into the kitchen where she heard a cabinet door open and close, and then the little old lady shuffled back down the hallway to her room and closed the door with a loud thump. She thought it was odd that the lady would ignore her, but maybe she was nearly deaf and blind or something. She looked at least 90. So my mom finished up the rooms she was in, but she didn't want to disturb the old lady, so she didn't do any of the back rooms. Later, she calls the owner, discusses what she measured, and apologizes again for disturbing the old lady. Silence on the phone, and then, "What old lady?" Mom says, "The old lady in the back room. I spoke to her when she came out, but I'm not sure if she heard me." More silence. What did she look like?" Mom replied, "Well, she was short and shuffled her feet coming down the hall in her white house slippers, wearing a multicolored muumuu dress, glasses, slightly hunched over and looking about 90 years old." At this point, Mom could hear the lady on the other end of the line breathing in a very distressed way, and she pauses a few seconds and says, You just described my mother. Thinking nothing of it, my mom replies, yeah, okay, like I said, please tell her I'm sorry for disturbing her. The owner says, you don't understand. My mother passed away 2 months ago. My mom was still a little bit white, shaken up and on the verge of tears as she was telling me this 20 years ago. Every time I mention the story again, she gets a little freaked out and won't discuss it.
Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. As I said before, words can't express how happy all of your support makes me, and it's you loyal viewers that make my dream of doing this full time become even closer. Please remember to smash that like button and subscribe, as you won't want to miss what I have in store for you next. We're celebrating 30k in style, with a special guest tomorrow, and one of your favourite topics. So go on, take a guess. And whilst you're in the comments section, please let me know if you're enjoying these longer compilations, and if so, I'll have a few more in store for you soon. If you've had a creepy or paranormal experience that you wish to share, feel free to send it to my email, which you can find in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at The Mortis Media for some secret stuff you won't find anywhere else. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.